Welcome to Issues and Answers with Senator Roger Kahn M.D. This program comes to you from Lansing each month to keep you informed on issues important to Saginaw and Gratiot counties. This month, Senator Kahn discusses Michigan's roads, what's needed to fix them, and how to pay for it with Director of the Michigan Department of Transportation, Kirk Steudle. And now, let's join Senator Kahn and Director Steudle.
Hello, this is Senator Roger Kahn. Welcome to Issues and Answers, broadcasted through WHNN. I have the great honor and privilege of having with me today Kirk Steudle from the Michigan Department of Transportation. Welcome.
Thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
You're in the news a lot lately about Michigan roads, and even when you're not in the news, you're sort of in the news with the red barrels around. Down in Lansing, there's been a fair amount of talk about needs and budgeting for improving our roads, but it seems to start always, Kurt, with the question about what are we doing now, how efficient we are, and some of it really is about who you are. Why don't we start with who are you, and how'd you get into this hot seat?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We talk about this time of year. When I get introduced to go speak in front of a crowd, I'm either introduced as the pothole guy, the orange barrel guy, or the snowplow guy, depending on what's happening that day. Yeah. And for two of those, I tell folks that, well, I can't get rid of the pothole without the orange barrel. So we got to have one or the other. My background, I got hired by the department as an engineer 25 years ago out of college. I've worked in 8 different cities in the state of Michigan.
You were up my way in the Saginaw area for a while, weren't you?
I spent a lot of my time in Saginaw area and worked on a lot of projects in Saginaw Bay City. Lived in Essexville for 5 years. Very fond memories of the Bay City and Saginaw area. It's a great place to grow up. It was a great place for growing up, for raising kids. And we did lots of great work around the Saginaw area as well. And then Governor Snyder asked me to be the State Transportation Director, and I had served that in a prior administration as well. But what I bring to this job is that engineering background, that engineering expertise about how construction works and how you put things together, tied with some of my national expertise that I've been able to pull in through sitting in this job. We're a leader.
How did you get national expertise? Have you been working on national committees too?
I have, actually. This last year I was the president of our National Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. And this year I'm the vice chair of the Transportation Research Board, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences.
Gee, that's really lucky for us, because it goes to the question about efficiencies and how we're doing with our money. And I guess part of that would be a comparison to other states. How do you deal with that question when you're asked it?
You know, I've been in the front of what we call performance measures with AASHTO, with that national association, trying to bring all 50 states together so that we can compare and contrast, you know, what the conditions are from one state to another. And that's a really difficult task, because some states don't want to be measured. They don't want to be compared. Right. I mean, you know, there's a war over that stuff, right? But we've really come together and we've identified the best ways to measure from state to state. And some states participate, some states don't. But we've been in the front, say we, meaning Michigan's been in the front of performance measures for a long, long time. In fact, it goes back to the late 90s when the legislature created the Asset Management Council, which was the first of its kind in the country.
Was it?
And that was to deal with all roads in Michigan and develop a strategy to how to manage them to get them in the best condition possible.
Is that our best benchmark of how we're doing in terms of how we spend our money, the Asset Management Council?
It really, the Asset Management Council is kind of the honest broker. I mean, it's made up of of all the agencies that have road jurisdiction. You have the technical folks and the policy folks, and that is the best barometer. They're looking at what our condition is, and they're projecting what it is going forward. And then from a state level, on just the state trunk line system, we do that as well. I mean, if we go back to 1997, there were no pavement predictive models about what might happen if you invest a nickel or 4 cents into the road network. What's that condition going to look like? In fact, the first model that predicted that was developed by the Michigan Department of Transportation before any others existed anywhere in the country. Now there's a whole bunch of private ones, and you can pull them. You can pull a variety of consultants that can help do that. But the first one in 1997 was developed here in Michigan by the department. So we've been leading that charge for a long, long time.
Well, how does it? What are the results? What can you say? How do we, I guess, self-evaluate ourselves, and how do we do it comparatively with some other states?
So we just did an analysis of the Midwest states, and we looked at how do we compare with population, number of registered vehicles, how big the system is, how many lane miles, how much money we invest.
Yeah.
And the one question I get a lot is, well, I just drove through Ohio, and Ohio's roads are better than ours.
Yeah,
Why is that?
Too. Yeah.
And when we finished this analysis, what popped out is every year for the last 8 years, Ohio raised their gas tax 8 years ago. Every year for the last 8 years, Ohio has invested almost $1 billion more into their road and bridge network than we do.
Than we do?
Right. So, I mean, when people ask, why is it different? That's why. I mean,
you get what you paid for, huh?
Yeah, you get what you pay for, and there's $1 billion more that's invested in their core asset.
So when we compare ourselves to Midwest states, how do you think we rank?
Well, I think our investment per vehicle or investment per person is the lowest. In fact, I know from that analysis that we are the lowest of the five.
So
we're at $174 per vehicle is what we invest back into roads and bridges.
174.
Right. And Ohio's at about 235, I believe.
I see. Well, that's something that we're going to be talking about, trying to do something about this year. By the way, if you're going to make comparisons for Michigan, we don't compare or shouldn't be compared, I would guess, to warm weather states. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair. I mean, I get that question. Well, you know, I just drove through Ohio or through Florida, you know, and all of their roads are smooth. Well, there's two things. One, they have lots of sand down below, and they don't get the cold weather that we get. Now you could make a greater comparison with, say, Wisconsin because it's similar, but even there it's a little different because of two things. One, we get the lake effect. So anybody that is on the west side of Michigan right now, they're getting pounded with snow, and the east side of Michigan might be getting rain. The other thing that's different about Michigan is our geology. The west side of Michigan has lots of sand, lots of gravel. The east side of Michigan has lots and lots of clay. Right. You know, if you dig a hole in your backyard, you're 3 inches down and you're into this real hard clay. Yeah. And then you get to some spots like southeast Michigan, and it's the softest clays in the country. So you're trying to build roads that are in varying different levels. Then you get to the upper peninsula, you got lots of rock and lots of stone. So those roads react differently because of what's down below them.
So that changes our, I suppose, cost per mile to build a road.
It really does. And the deterioration is different. You know, a road in West Michigan deteriorates differently than a road in Southeast Michigan or even East Michigan, wherever all that clay is.
Well, we talked for a second, you mentioned the difference between Michigan and Ohio on road funding. How is the money that we have available for funding, how does that come to you, and then how do you distribute it, if you would explain to us?
You know, that's a tremendous question that we get asked a lot. And so the Constitution restricts gas taxes, so the gas tax in the state of Michigan and the registration fee. Those must be used for transportation purposes. So
that's the excise tax.
That's the excise tax.
And registration fees.
And registration fee. The sales tax is not. The sales tax is separate, and there's also a constitutional provision that says the 4% sales tax must go to schools, and then the other 2% goes to the general fund. So the piece that goes to transportation is the cents per gallon and the registration fee, and those are constitutionally restricted, have to go to transportation. In fact, I've sat in front of your predecessors' committees and justified why money was going to different departments because was that a transportation purpose? We work through that. So all of that goes for those purposes. Then it all goes into this formula that was developed in 1951 about how you distribute the money. And then over time...
That was before we had a freeway system, isn't it?
That was before we had freeway systems.
Same formula?
Same formulas. Now it's been amended a couple times. In fact, really what you see some amendments that actually take money off the top.
Yeah.
So you'll see the money come in the top of the fund, and then you have the distribution that goes 39%. 39.1% to MDOT, 39.1% to counties, particularly county road commissions, and then the remaining 22% that goes to cities and villages.
And that's the way it's been
that's the way
for
it's
60 years.
Yes. And if you add up all those agencies, there's like 620 agencies that money all gets distributed to.
That's a full-time job just distributing it, isn't it?
It's too bad we didn't have the chart. You could see the chart, and then the takedowns that are on the top. There's a variety of those. There's a constitutional provision that says we need to put up to 10% in comprehensive transportation, which pays for transit and rail and port activities as well.
Well, all in, how much money do we get each year? And I suppose, how much do we need to have? Well, I guess the usual figure is what, 80 to 90% good roads? Is that
Yes.
what you'd like to see?
Yeah.
How much do we get and how much do we need?
So our annual budget for the Department of Transportation is about $3.4 billion. And of that, you can kind of divide that into thirds. And these aren't exact, but it's good round numbers here.
Okay.
1/3 comes from registration fees.
Okay.
1/3 comes from state gas taxes.
Okay.
And 1/3 comes from federal gas taxes. I mean the federal gas tax that we pay on top that we send to Washington and then they send back.
Okay.
So that's kind of the three pieces of our budget. And then so the distribution that I talked about with 39-22,
Right.
that's for the state portion only. The federal highway portion actually has a little different formula because it's geared towards the interstate system.
I see. Okay.
Now, you ask, what should that number be? And it goes back to, well, what condition level do we want?
Let's take 80 to 90%
So
good
if we
fair
say
roads.
80 to 90% on the state system, which is what has been our target since 1997, then we need an additional $1.2 to $1.4 billion a year just to maintain that system. And that doesn't add any, that's not any modernization, it's not any additional bells and whistles anywhere.
Doesn't fix 127 in Gratiot County for me?
It unfortunately, no. It really, it's going to fix what we have, and that's it. And I would argue that we really should be looking, the governor's initiative on logistics and transportation, logistics, and distribution, that we should be looking at what system do we need in place for our economy to leverage and go forward.
Well, on that subject then, if we can come up with something to fund another billion and change, I guess, here, then we still have capital improvement projects. We have roads that are no longer can be fixed that are going to require some funding. What do we do about that? If we wave a magic wand, here's your 1.2 to 5 billion.
Right.
Now, what am I going to do about widening roads in southeast Michigan over on the west side, 131, and my 127? What will we do about that?
So that the solution to that is we're going to need to add some additional on top of there.
Yeah.
And so it could be up for lots of discussions to how best to do that. Again, you can pay for roads with four sources. You can pay for a gas tax. You can use it as a registration fee. You can do it as a toll road. You could do it as a general fund transfer. Those are really the four ways that you generate revenue.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that are pro toll roads. There's a lot of people that are anti-toll roads, and I'm not suggesting we should do one or the other, but it is a debate that we, as this generation of Michigan people, ought to have that discussion. Say, do we want these or not? I mean, the generation before us said, no, we don't want these, and we want to pay for them in another manner.
Yeah.
If we decide we want to do it differently, then that's up for us to decide as a society, how do we want to pay for this? So, I mean, if you look at those couple of projects, there's got to be something over and above on top that takes care of that modernization, or as you said, capital projects for what we really need in the future.
Well, in talking about how we pay for it, The governor in his State of the State speech mentioned the wear and tear that we have on vehicles due to having roads that aren't what we want. His number, I think, was something like $80 per year per vehicle. When I had the Senate Transportation Workforce, a number was floating around there of about $300 per vehicle per year. How do you come up with an estimate of what a road does to your vehicle and the damage to it? How would you go about figuring that out?
So the governor's number, just to bring those two numbers in line, the governor's number was, here's how much more Michigan pays than the surrounding average.
Yeah.
So as part of that Midwest state comparison, we actually had the report from a nationwide nonprofit, nonpartisan group that looked at repair costs across the country.
Yeah.
And we took those states, and Michigan's repair costs are the highest, vehicle repair costs. And you know, this is
That's all vehicles?
This is all vehicles, right?
It'll be trucks as well as personal vehicles.
Correct. And so then that's the number, and we took that with you know, the number of registered vehicles and said this is how much per vehicle.
Yeah.
So this group did that national analysis, and that's what we did the comparison from. And from the 5 Midwest states here, we have the highest repair costs of all of them. And then the
Is the
governor's
guess
number
that that would be recoverable if we had roads that were as good as the Midwest states?
Yeah, because I mean, I can give you my personal example is I have a 2004 Chevy Trailblazer, and about 25,000 miles ago, I was getting a sound in the front right hub, and I went into my repair shop, and the guy had no idea who I was. And I just said, hey, you know, what's this noise? And he said, well, it's probably your hub. And he said, is it the right? I didn't tell him which one. He said, is it the right? And I said, yeah. And I said, well, if you're fixing this, he said, it's the hub. It's going to cost you $450. I said, well, while you're doing it, should you just do the other one at the same time? And he said, no, you'll get more miles out of the other one. I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, that's the edge of the road that falls apart, and those front wheel bearings are the first ones that go.
Really?
Now, that was 25,000 miles ago. I haven't replaced the other one yet.
Really?
So, you know, that cost me $450, you know, on a weekend that I've said I would have preferred an installment plan. You know, a little per gallon to take care of that edge of the road that's bad. I mean, so that's a personal story.
Well, is it reasonable to say then that fixing the roads would give us an opportunity to our drivers to save that $80?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they can save the $80, and the other big one the governor talked about was saving lives.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's tough. You can't put a price on.
He quoted a number of about 100 lives.
100 lives, and that's from kind of a national analysis of what road conditions do. I mean, if you just think about, you know, that edge of the road that's bad, and you lose control, you know, maybe on one of these winter days when there's a little bit of ice, and all of a sudden you're spinning, you're out of control, and you know, end up with a fatality or a couple, you know, or somebody runs off the road and hits another fixed object.
Are there any stats about bad accidents and injuries too? Or can you get that?
We keep, we have all the fatalities and serious injuries, so we know what those numbers are, and our goal is to keep dropping that number lower and lower. We don't have any that specifically, you know, say it was due to road condition. That's the hard part, because, you know, it's not something that we ask a law enforcement officer to do at the scene of an accident. So we can't dive in and say, you know, these 6 accidents were because of this.
Well, it'd be if there's a difference in 100 lives lost that is documentable, one would guess that it would also be true with non-fatal accidents.
Correct.
There'd be a substantial number there.
Yeah, and you know, your medical background, I mean, just think of all those, whenever there's an accident, there's some kind of medical treatment. So there's an EMT that has to go out, right? And then there's probably some trip to an emergency room, and then there's going to be follow-on medical expenses. That's, you know, now we're into a whole nother area of costs in society, and you know, medical costs.
I lost the battle on motorcycle helmets. I thought we think that we still should be using them. And I thought there were some stats out to suggest Michigan's accident rate is going up, and maybe fatality rates regarding motorcycles is going up. And maybe it's a little soon to revisit that argument.
That is one of the stats that we've tracked for a long time. The Office of Highway Safety Planning tracks all those fatalities and the types of fatalities, and And I think it's a bit early to say what's the trend, but it's, the time will tell what the impact is.
Well, let's say we don't get any funding, any change in funding. Our roads are going to then continue to deteriorate. And one guesses there'll be some cost attendant to that when we finally do make a decision that we want to fix them. What is the rate of deterioration and the cost of deterioration? What is the failure to act going to mean?
Sure, that's a great question. This fits into our asset management approach.
Yeah.
And so we know that since 1997 we've been on an upward trend, and our goal was to get to 90% good in 2007. We got there about 2007, 2008, and it's been dropping since then. It's coming down. In our projection model, we've looked at how accurate did we project it. Back to 1997, how accurate were we? And we were within 1% of what the actual condition would be. So we feel very confident in our model as we project forward that we're going down this hill, and once things start to deteriorate, they accelerate. So we're in the 80s now, and we're going to go down. If we do nothing for the next 10 years, we're going to be at 40% good roads.
40?
40. I mean, so there will be sections that will just be gravel because there will be nothing left to do. So at that point, there's nothing left other than a total reconstruction, completely rebuild the road for 60% of the roads in Michigan. And when you do the math for that number, just on the state trunk line, that's $25 billion. If you just let this, if everybody says, no, we can't do anymore, it's too expensive, well, here's what's going to happen. We're going to end up at that piece where we're 40% good, 60% poor, and it will cost $25 billion conservatively. That's not even adjusted for inflation. That's just the state trunk line system to get back to where we are today.
And that's in how many years?
That's in 10.
10 years. Okay, it'll cost us $25 billion. But
Plus
if we put another 10, 15 billion in, so we'd save 10 billion.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep, absolutely. And that's what the governor's message in the State of the State was. If we sat down at the kitchen table and made this choice and said, all right, I could have this really big balloon payment and pay this $25 billion later, or I could make payments and save myself $10 or $15 billion. It really, as he said, it was a no-brainer. Most families would say, well, of course, we need to do this now so that we don't have that big bill later. I mean, much like my Trailblazer piece, that I would have preferred to not spend $400 on the weekend. I would have preferred to spend it, every penny.
Or my house, I'd rather fix the roof before the rain is inside and ruins the furniture.
Right. That is another perfect example.
Yeah. Well, look. I guess you're talking about saving some lives. You made that point, and you made the point. I guess this will save some money, both on a personal basis and for the state. How many jobs would this create if we got some extra money? And are those one-time jobs or those ongoing jobs? And do you have any stats on that?
We do, actually. We have worked with the University of Michigan with their economic area at economic analysis, and so we do that analysis on our 5-year plan, our investment that goes out.
Yeah.
So we did the same analysis that, all right, if you invest this additional money, what does it mean? And it's 12,000 jobs.
Is that over 10 years or 12?
No, that's annually. 12,000 jobs annually per investment. Per
permanent jobs?
So that's where people will think, oh, well, that's the person at the end of the asphalt paver or behind the concrete truck. So we had them do the analysis, and they went back in, and we got direct jobs and indirect jobs. And while half of those might be active construction jobs.
6 of the 12,000.
Right. And the rest of them are all of the supplier pieces. So there's professional services, there's office services, there's, all those folks are going to eat.
Yeah.
There's all of those things which are directly related to it. And then you have the spin-off because of the economic activity. I mean, poor roads are a distraction and a deterrent for new businesses coming in.
Tourism.
Because they'll say, well, you can't even take care of your basic infrastructure. Why should I be here? How do I know the road's going to be there? So there's an economic impact that pushes people away.
Yeah.
So that figures in there as well. Again, that's information that came from the economist at U of M that helped develop that model.
Okay, so it's 6,000 direct and 6,000
Roughly.
indirect,
Yeah,
if
roughly.
that's fair, for a total of 12,000, and those would be ongoing jobs. All right. What happened that we weren't able to get this done in the last? Well, I served. You and I met originally when I served on the transportation committee when Jennifer Granholm was governor. And you were pointing out this problem at that time. What's that now? 5 years ago?
Probably 5, 6 years ago, yeah.
What happened that we haven't been able to get this done? What's the problem with selling the product, I guess, or having the will on my end to get it done, or the combination thereof?
First of all, from a state trunk line perspective, people are driving the freeways and they say, well, these are in pretty good shape. Well, they are, because they're 90% good. And the argument becomes much harder when you're trying to tell somebody, now we need to invest to keep them good, as opposed to, okay, everything is really bad and everybody can see, oh yeah, we got to do something, and then you spend a whole bunch of money to try to get it good. So the argument is much more difficult when people are driving, well, this looks okay. Well, it might look okay, but it's not going to stay that way forever, and the ongoing maintenance needs to be injected into it to keep it in that condition. So I think part of it became, well, first of all, in that intervening time, we had a recession, and things got really tight.
That was a big deal. Yeah. Is a big deal.
And we had the stimulus dollars that came through. That there was a big influx there, and I think people were saying, well, let's see what happens with that. And I remember talking with you about that and said that was essentially 1 year's worth of funding injected into the system that said, oh, well, we're going to fix all the nation's roads and bridges with this one-time injection. And all of the professionals sitting in my seat across the country said, no, not with a one-time injection. Of funds just to fix that.
Now you have a 5-year plan or something like that. Is that about right?
Yeah, we do.
That stimulus dollars moved some of the stuff off the 5-year plan, and then other things take.
Yep. Yeah, we have a rolling 5 years, so every year we're adding another year, so we're advancing things in and adding another one in the back. I mean, contrary to popular belief, we don't wake up in March and say, what are we going to build this year? We actually are 5 years out planning for what the deterioration is going to look like in 5 years, anticipating that so that we can get there with the right repair at the right time.
Do the county road commissions know what you're going to be doing, or?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the reasons that we put the 5-year plan in place in the mid-'90s. Was, if you go to every little city in the state and even some big counties, they'll have a capital improvement plan, right?
Yeah.
So our then director, who had been a mayor of a small town, said, well, where's your capital improvement plan? And at that point in the mid-'90s, we didn't have one. So that's what started, and it started as a communications tool for the local units of government. Says, here's where we're going to be working. Now let's coordinate so that we don't have parallel roads closed. Yeah. And let's make sure that we can move around. The other benefit that it's had for us is that we've been able to work with the local communities as a project's coming to really help fit their little community. I mean, if you think of Merrill or Hemlock or any of the communities in your district, that we work with them, because while that's M46 running through town, it's Main Street for them. And we're going to be here once in the next 30 years really doing a major reconstruction. And we really changed the department's focus to work with those communities and say, well, how do we make this Main Street that you're proud of? That we can't hang all the Christmas tree ornaments on it without having the tree fall over. But there's certainly things that we can do to make this Main Street for whatever the village is and make them proud of it, and have their businesses thrive.
Kurt, it's been wonderful having you here, but we're running out of time, so I guess we're going to have to call this to a close. Maybe we can get you to come back and talk again.
My pleasure.
Further, we got another half hour's worth of questions I'm going to ask you. Thank you very much.
Welcome.